Crakes. He's a Crakes media consultant, also former Fox Sports executive, joins us, Sick on 365 Radio, 365 Sports. Pat, thanks for your time. So what did today mean? What does it actually mean, in your opinion, about the Big 12 and ESPN and Fox having some sort of, whatever the word is, negotiations was not used, but discussions? What does it mean?
It's great to be back, by the way.
Thank you.
I guess, it feels, first of all, I think things are settling down on the larger strategic picture. The Big Ten doesn't look to be expanding. I had someone suggest to me that this weekend, Notre Dame and Ohio State are going to play each other. So Kevin Warren and the Notre Dame group will get together at Ohio Stadium, and Notre Dame will come out of that joining the Big Ten, to which I replied, you mean Notre Dame's never been to a big game before? They're going to be so impressed that they're going to suddenly jump into the Big Ten. And I'm going to be at that game, by the way. And I'm just like, no, stop. So, in the settling down of this, it looks like now the Pac-12 and the Big 12 had an opportunity to kind of assess the strategic picture. And what they've discovered is something I think is very obvious. In general, overall, elite, good level college football's value has never been higher. And that's because pay TV distributors view it as a top reason for people to have a pay TV bundle. So they do have something organically, even if they don't have four of the flagship programs that once belonged to both conferences. So the Pac-12 has a normal procedural conversation going on with its partners, and the Big 12 has decided to start, unofficial conversations with the partner, which, by the way, is very normal to do. I think maybe our fourth contract at Fox was an extension, basically, for the NFL when I was there. With all the partners can talk anytime. They can ignore parts of the deal sometimes, right? They decide it just doesn't work for them, and they both agree, like, we're not going to obey that here. We're going to do something else. They don't even have to change the language. And so it's smart for the Big 12, in my opinion. Brett is a very, very impressive person. He has some kind of plan. He wants to explain it to ESPN and Fox. I think it's smart for him to walk in the door and say, look, I've got some thoughts about how we might be able to create value together. It doesn't have to wait for the contract negotiations that they're supposed to happen in a couple of years. We can do it now. And here's how we see it fitting in. What do you guys think? So I think things have settled down. The Big 12 and the Pac-12 are trying to figure out what their futures are into a landscape that is kind of emerging, right? At first there for a while, you really couldn't tell what the landscape was. There were so many rumors and so much chaos. It's settled down some now. And barring something from the Big Ten that's spectacular, it seems to me that into that kind of peace or that settling in, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 can find a way to realize their value and advance their opportunities in the future by securing good distribution with their existing partners.
Pat, is this bad news for anyone in particular? Because there's a leap that people are making that the Big 12 is trying to step in front of the line of the Pac-12 and hasten their demise.
Yeah, the whole Pac-12 versus Big 12 thing is interesting to talk about, but the practical reality is that both have value because elite level college football has never, like I said, has never been more valuable. Are they competing against each other? I don't think they really are. I think that they are now, as they're currently constructed, important pieces that can round out any big media company's college football distribution plan. And that includes NBC and CBS, who now have entered or have kind of revalidated their commitments to college football. So they now those conferences can't talk to those networks yet, but one of them will be able to, and certainly in the Pac-12 at some point if they wanted to. But I don't see them as competitive. I see them as complementary to the current distribution formats that both Fox and ESPN have, and even CBS and NBC, or new participants and streamers. So I think for both conferences, participating with a streamer would be complicated because it's going to reduce their reach. And those conferences do need reach. They need to be validated on established platforms, in my opinion, because they need to get to as many people as possible. And going to streaming is more complicated. It reduces reach. And so I feel like their future is with established media networks as part of a complementary part in their current configurations to the kind of portfolio of sports that the other networks have. I don't know that anyone loses this kind of fight between the conferences seems to be a lot more something that happens on Twitter than happens in the conference offices or even with the media networks. And to that point, these media networks, in particular Fox and ESPN, are used to working together. And both these conferences are still their current partners, right? And they have every incentive, if there's value to create, to work together with the conferences to figure that out. So I think it's the right time for the Big 12 to kind of initiate as many conversations as it can. It's the right time, certainly, for the Pac-12 to figure out what the future of their deal is going to look like. I think as they're currently configured, they have value. I don't know who's the loser here. I just don't see any losers. The question is, how are you positioning yourself for the future, whether it's future expansion or realignment and the college football playoff, and who your partners are going to be as you walk towards that.
Patrick, I've seen renewed calls, and you're right about Twitter and just social media in general. It can be its own world, right? It's like funhouse mirrors sometimes. But the merger of the Pac and Big 12, why not? Just at this point, they might as well. Why does it make sense? Why does it not make sense? Why would that happen or not happen?
To me, I think that if you're trying to optimize the merger of the Big 12 and the Pac-12 makes a lot of sense. I understand somebody tweeted to my friend Bob Thompson, who I think is going to be on later, saying about cultural fit between some schools in the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and so on. And I just cultural fit. I mean, give me a break, okay? I mean, that is something that only comes from a passionate fan who legitimately cares about their conference school. They legitimately care about it, but it's just we're way beyond cultural fit. That's not going to happen here. What this is about is economics and fit within media network portfolios. So for me, I guess I see a merger, right? When you start drawing it up on the board, you say, okay, well, what does the perfect solution look like, right? The perfect solution for the best football schools would be to find a way to get some of the best football schools out of the ACC and create a completely new conference. That's probably not going to happen. So what's the next one? The next one is, look, there's a lot of scale and a lot of great football schools combined in the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Sure, there's problems. There's cultural fit. There's maybe the schools aren't necessarily compatible with each other on a research basis or something like that, something academic, which, by the way, can't be ignored. But the truth of the matter is, placing together that many college football programs, you really have some value. You're not going to be able to be ignored by an expanded college football playoff. You put together enough quality games and matchup and inventory heft that you can have multiple partners that don't include the existing college football duopoly, which remains Fox and ESPN, because the expansion of the Big Ten windows on NBC and CBS did nothing to damage that duopoly. Matter of fact, it preserved it in many ways, allowing consolidation with Big Ten for Fox and SEC for ESPN. So to me, I just see a lot of good things about a merger. I understand that's easier said than done. Nobody understands that better than me. But maybe a step towards that is just figuring out new deals for both conferences with the existing networks. And you kind of walk yourself to a merger or expansion of some type that makes sense in the context of that, because you secured really good distribution. And with that, you can begin to have maybe some more calmer talks about what something might look like. And the advantage would be that your current media partners would remain your media partners in that. And perhaps both deals for Big 12 and Pac-12 with Fox and ESPN could have language that recognize that and set up some procedures for how that could get valued.
Pat, when the last time we had Bob on the show, I had asked him about, it was when the Big Ten happened and NBC was involved, and that was a big surprise. Do you think that because NBC will not have, say, a doubleheader every week because they only have half of Notre Dame's schedule because of the home games and neutral sites, do you think that the Big 12 or NBC could be in the water for the Big 12 so they can at least half those weeks where they don't have a doubleheader maintain the doubleheader and keep that rolling through?
Well, I think, right, assuming either the Pac-12 or the Big 12 can get out of their exclusive negotiating windows, either today or eventually in the Big 12's case, that there's enough value with both conferences, but the Big 12 in particular, that an NBC might look at something like that. I think that both conferences, as currently configured, round out all the media networks' distribution plans. And that is useful. Again, this all comes down to pay TV distributors and what they're prepared to pay. They're prepared to pay the most for the NFL. After the NFL, they're pretty much prepared to pay the most for college football. And so even though Texas and Oklahoma won't be in the Big 12 one way or another in 2 years, that doesn't mean that the Big 12 hasn't drafted off an overall increase in value for elite level college football that won't prove to be very profitable for them, even as they're currently configured. The question is, who are they partnering with, and how does that fit into keeping the Big Ten and the SEC, as I keep saying, in your front windshield as you look forward towards the college football playoff expansion?
Is this discussion or this announcement today that they will at least start whatever this is with the Big 12, is that in any way a sign that ESPN is not going to go all in with the Pac-12?
I don't think it's a sign of anything. I think that that press release was designed to send a message. Okay, ESPN and what ESPN thinks and what Fox thinks aren't going to be impacted by that press release. That doesn't mean that they don't think the Big 12 doesn't have value, and that doesn't mean that they're not welcoming a conversation with Brett, who's, again, a very sharp person. I don't think it means anything to them otherwise than, okay, let's hear what you want to say. We are happy to discuss anything with you. And like I say, organic changes to contracts within term, doing things outside the contract together within term, doing things that sometimes are in conflict with the language of the terms of the contract happen with partners when they have a contract together. You don't always have to change it. And extending or redoing the contract also happens. So it's smart to go. I'm sure that press release, though, has been accompanied with a detailed plan by Brett to get things going. So I just don't believe that they would release a press release like that without a plan to present both networks. And so I would imagine that plan is detailed and thorough, knowing Brett, and it'll be interesting to see what the response is.
Pat, do you think there's any part of the Big 12's plan where OU and Texas' early exit is used as a chess piece, or is that just fantasy land once again?
No, it's totally possible. Like somebody's like, well, there's an exit fee. Okay, well, you're the Big 12, and and you want to get paid, and you want a long-term deal with certain types of media partners. Maybe somehow we figure out that exit fee because Oklahoma and Texas want to leave early. But in exchange for that, the conference is reconfigured somehow or is given a long-term media deal. So there's just ways to figure all of that out. I always talk to some of my investor clients, like adding a year to the term of a deal can change the economics of it because you can push more of the value creation assumptions further out. And sometimes that's how we made deals work at Fox. We just added a year of term because it fixed the economic problems on the front end. It gave you more time to bet on yourself, more times for things to evolve. So there's lots of ways to find $85 million. I'm sure Bob has a lot to say about that and provide some context on that. But there just has to be a value creation exercise that makes sense.
What are one of those ways? I'd like $85 million.
Yeah, we want that recipe.
Just morph yourself into the University of Texas, and suddenly it'll probably show up somehow. Yeah. Somebody will be prepared to help you figure that out.
Pat, I know you've got to go, but is there a chance that doing this, whatever they can, also gives the Big 12 hard numbers that otherwise were speculative compared to what the Pac-12 might have earlier than them as far as hard numbers to anybody that might at least be listening?
Yeah, I think look, by going on offense, I think that the big thing for me is I don't like playing defense. Sometimes defense can buy you time. It can get your opponent, or you can get the situation to come at you, and you can read and react to it. But in this case, it's really time to go on offense. I for years, a couple of years ago, I was just baffled why the Pac-12 and the Big 12 couldn't sort something out. Right, this is right before Texas and Oklahoma moved. Now, obviously, it's easier said than done. Each school's individual. The conferences are obviously connected to the schools, but these schools also have their own living, breathing agendas and things like that. It's easier said than done, but to me, I just really believe that when you think about trying to figure out what the future of your distribution is going to be, that it's good to have put some flag down and that you've gone on offense and you've been aggressive and you've made it clear to your existing partners that you're ready to deal today and that you have a plan that helps them build value. And that sets the stage for a couple of years. Now, they can't go talk to anyone, right, until that contract and that exclusive negotiation window is done. But you certainly can talk to your own partners and make it clear that you have a plan. And that doesn't stop you from doing your own things internally, right? And I would have been shocked if Brett Yarnick had rolled over or just sat there and said, we're just going to stand still. He's not the kind of guy. And he hasn't done that. So I think there is advantage to being on offense, and they've recaptured some initiatives, at least in the context of what matters to them. Again, I don't like this Pac-12 versus Big 12 stuff. I think that there's something to it, right? Because media networks only have so much to spend on everything, and they're trying how much they can get from pay TV distributors and advertisers. But in this case, you got to get your stuff right, and then the value gets realized somewhere. And if it's by your current partners for ESPN and Fox for the Big 12, great. If in 2 years it's an NBC or a CBS or someone else, so be it. But let's be on offense. Let's not be on defense.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate your time. I hope to have you on as the future goes into whatever we find out from the various particular networks and also conferences. Great stuff. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Pat,
Anytime, guys.
Pat Crakes again. Crakes Media, former Fox Sports executive. Bob,